Alright gamers, this is going to be another commentary Mythic Plus video, and we'll be doing a plus 15 Ara-Kara. While we gather up this first pool, I just wanted to thank everyone for their support on these videos. We just hit 900 subscribers, which is super close to my personal goal of 1,000 subscribers for the year. I'm super excited and thankful for each and every one of you. I really do appreciate the support, and it's been really fun to make these Mythic Plus key videos. It's definitely helping me watch these videos back and figure out a lot of the mistakes and places that I can improve in. This is a pretty typical higher key Ara-Kara pull. You pretty much pull everything all the way up to the first attendant. If you're a tailor, there is an item that you can pick up before the dungeon starts, which puts this guy in a cocoon and makes it to where he can't cast anything for like, I think maybe like 15 seconds or something. It's pretty significant. So if you have tailoring, you should definitely be picking that up before you start the dungeon. That first pull doesn't really have much in it. You just have to blast everything down before any of your people die. Typically, I don't really do that well in this dungeon, and that's something that I want to improve on. As you can see, my first overall, I'm sitting at 2.8 million, which is not a lot. It's just, I don't know, I'm not very consistent on that first pull, so I think I just have to get more reps in. In the beginning of this dungeon, you run around and gather a bunch of these spiders for count. Something that adds value to your group as a Windwalker is to make sure that you're dispelling yourself and other people to make the healers and the tanks' job easier if they're able to dispel, as well as sweeping these guys before they explode. That way you can have more of them explode at the same time. Something that I would refrain from doing is ring of piecing these guys right before they explode. I have killed people in the past like that, so unless you're in like a coordinated group and you let everyone know that you're going to ring of piece these out, I wouldn't do it because people can die. Here, the most important thing on this attendant is to make sure that you're popping a defensive when the big AoE damage comes out. If you don't, past the 12, if you don't do that, you will die. So that's something that the healer needs to be aware of as well. It's called Call of the Brood. So it does a ton of damage. Just make sure you got a defensive in there rolling. You should be okay. As you can see, this is a 15, and I just popped a defensive and I lived, and it was perfectly fine. So now we're heading off to the last attendant in order to spawn the first boss. I'm not really sure what was going on with my Mythic Plus weak aura on the right hand side of my screen. It didn't show any of like the boss timers or when we killed those bosses. No idea why that was. We really like that weak aura, and it's a great way for me to gauge the pace of our group compared to another 15 that I've done, or maybe a lower key that I've done, to see how we're competing up against it. There, before I ring a piece, I double checked to make sure that the party was to the left of it. That way I don't kill anyone with the last minute movement. I don't think at the beginning of this video I talked about what was the party comp. So we are running an elemental shaman, an unholy DK Windwalker monk, protection paladin, and a resto druid. Here, the most important kick is the gold star, which is the smaller attendant. So the big spider hanging down, or crab, I guess for me, hanging down from the sky, only targets the tank with the bolts, which doesn't really matter. The smaller attendant can target anyone in the party, and that's where a nasty overlap can kill someone. So that's the most important kick in this pull. We pulled 2 crawlers into this attendant. There's really not much going on. I can see that I have both of my major cooldowns up and my potion is up as well. Normally, people would just go straight to the boss after this. This tank on his route decides to pull this pack over here. I have no idea how this affects the route or where we can skip things, but this isn't a terrible route. You kind of like this. You just get more percent out of the way, and there's less downtime while you wait for the boss to move to the platform. So you're really maximizing all of your time and making sure you get the most out of your cooldowns. Again, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this is a pickup group that I got invited into, which is another thing that's not very common. If you're an off meta spec, it's very hard to get into Mythic Plus keys after a certain point. You pretty much have to outscale IO wise in order to be invited to some of these groups, which is the opposite to a meta class where you can be slightly below what the average IO of the group is, and you'll probably still get invited. So here, the most important thing on this first boss is to make sure that you kill these crawlers, because if a crawler touches this boss, the tank pretty much dies, unless they're just Giga Gaming. I would still just kill the ads. You have to pop a defensive on the Shrill, and you probably have to pop a smaller defensive or maybe even a health potion whenever the web attack is coming out as well, because there's a lot of movement and healers can't really heal all that much during that time. And there is a chance that you might be super spread out. You're just killing the ads. The best way to handle this mechanic is to just make sure that you're stacked as a group and you're moving together, kind of like we are here. This is obviously a lot easier to coordinate in a group versus just random PUGs, but I think everyone here understands the idea behind this boss, so we're not really struggling. Personally, I think it's a lot easier to PUG in the higher keys because a lot of these players have already done these keys and they're aware of the mechanics and the damage that goes out, and it's just a matter of just getting the right group together and everyone just playing good. Each one of these players in this group can time this 15 and most likely can time this on like a 16 as well. It's just a matter of there's no stupid deaths, no mistakes, anything like that. The Shrill comes out, we pop a defensive. The spider spawns here is the only RNG factor of this fight. Sometimes you can get a pretty terrible spawn in the middle of webbing, so you really couldn't attack them until they get closer. With the benefit of having a ranged player, which is our elemental shaman, he was able to get the whole spider pack all the way down like 50% before they got anywhere close to the boss. Very good value that you can provide to the group as the Windwalker monk is to make sure that you're ring appeasing the ads if they're getting too close to the boss. And then you also have leg sweep, which can pretty much stun all the spiders while you and your team burn them down. Pretty sure the healer noticed that a lot of us don't have any defensives, so they used the spirit link. Pretty sure once you get it to about like anywhere between like 12 to 15%, you can burn the boss down if you get a very good spider spawn and you just CC them out in the middle of nowhere. Here we decided to play safe and make sure that we take care of the ads. And as I mentioned in my last video, a lot of these higher keys don't require insane damage, don't require you to do turbo insane plays. All you have to do is just really play safe. There, that Shrill took me down to 500 KHP. That right there is just an eye level thing. Obviously, the healer was healing me, but if I was 5 or 6 item levels lower, I probably would have died there. Making sure that you're geared in these higher keys is very important. Making sure that you have the best gear possible in your push groups will just make your life a lot easier. There is a ton of times when like a kick gets missed or something, or mechanic goes off and it takes me down to 5%. And I'm like, yeah, if I was lower item level, I would just be dead. So here you want to make sure that we're focusing on the big blood guard and we're kicking the web mage. The web mage kick is very, very important. It can kill pretty much anyone if you're not max health. And you as the Windwalker should be de-raging the assistant here. That is something that is new to us in the War Within. There's a talent that makes our in-cap de-enrage as well. That is something that I want to personally improve upon. This is something that we just recently got and I'm not used to using that ability. And I'm also not used to looking for mobs that crash out. I don't really know all the mobs that I need to de-enrage. Going into this next pack right here, not a lot going on. You just have to make sure that you kill the stag shell, because if that cast goes off, I believe it spawns another blood guard, which could pretty much brick the specific route that you're taking. Focus the blood guard here as well, and you make sure that you de-enrage the assistant. No idea why I opened up my character sheet there. I think it might have just been a misclick. We're taking the left route, but we're hugging the right wall. I don't really remember what we did after this, so we'll just have to find out together. But here, again, we're trying to de-rage the assistant, and we're making sure we're getting kicks on the web mage. And so far, this group has been very, very consistent with kicks. I feel pretty safe. I don't think we've missed too many kicks, which is probably another big benefit of playing with a protection paladin, because they do have a lot of options to kick. That's something very, very nice in pickup groups. The tricky part about this area is that pat right there. If you pull all of this together, your tank is most likely dead. So you have to make sure that you're either splitting this up or you're doing some form of skip heck to get past them to make sure that your tank is alive. It's not really the damage going out. It's just a ton of these guys hitting that strike attack, and they could just mess up your tank pretty easily. We're we're going to be pulling that extra 2-pack into this, I guess, 5-pack. The kick that you have to get is on the web mage, and we just have to de-enrage the assistant. In my opinion, one of the most important things that you could be doing if you're playing an off-meta spec is to make sure that you're fully utilizing your entire toolkit. I can't really speak on other classes, but I can talk on Windwalker. I want to make sure that you're using ROPS in defensive ways, especially whenever the tank is out of defensive cooldowns or you can see they're starting to kite. You want to make sure you're de-enraging mobs as often as possible. There, I ring a piece to that add in because I know we're not going to be using the ring a piece in a defensive manner. You want to make sure that you're in capping, not missing your kicks, not overlapping your sweeps. You want to make sure that you bring as much value to the team as you possibly can. That for me is something that I think about when I'm running these groups, and it kind of helps me when I'm not doing the most damage. It makes me feel a little bit better about being like 400k behind on overalls at the end of a dungeon. This pack right here doesn't really do anything. I kind of hate this pack because it's just, in a way, one big blood guard. All of the other small blood workers just fall over pretty quickly. I kind of wish that you could pull this guy into boss or something. I'm sure there's a more optimal way to do this to where it doesn't feel as bad. At the end of the day, this dungeon's timer is incredibly free, and there's no point in taking any additional risks because even on this 15, I'm pretty sure we had 3 or 4 minutes remaining on the timer at the end. Why take unnecessary risks? Why do MDI pulls? What is the point of any of that when you can just hold down W key and you have a ton of time at the end of the dungeon? Here we're going into the second boss with Lust. We're sitting at 80% count. On this boss, you really don't have to do much. So if you get the Infest, you pop a defensive. There is a frontal that goes out. I've seen that frontal kill people before. I have no idea how that happens. I'm pretty sure if you stand on where the boss comes up, pretty much insta-kills you. But it's so rare. I think it's only happened like maybe twice in the entire season for me. That doesn't really matter. This boss also spawns those web mages. The best thing that you can do as a Woodwalker there is to ring of peace them into the place where you're fighting the boss at, which is this ring. So here I got an Infest. As you can see, I'm taking a ton of damage. I popped Fort Brew, and I'm pretty sure I popped my health potion. So the Eye of the Swarm is over. Also, something that you want to do with these Infests is you want to make sure that you're grouping them in the same area as best as you can. You always want to make sure you're prioing these web mages. I'm pretty sure if that long cast goes off, the person gets stuck or cocooned. I've also never really seen that. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a concern on this boss. If I'm going to be honest, this boss is incredibly free most of the times. I've never really seen a group struggle with it, and I think that's probably why this dungeon is very easy for a lot of groups, because the first 2 bosses are not that hard, and honestly, this dungeon doesn't really have that many complex mechanics. On top of having a very, very good timer, makes this key very, very timeable, even in PUGs. I'm pretty sure you can pug this on a 16 as well. There's not much going on here. We survived another Eye of the Swarm cast, and it's pretty much just rinse and repeat at this point. You get infest, pop a defensive, just focus boss. If anything, you can probably just in-cap this web mage and just tunnel boss and kill it. He's at 10%. I ring a piece the web mage into the group to get him to move, and we just stack these two guys up together. In my opinion, this boss is pretty good for the Windwalker because of the uptime that we have on this boss, and of course it's like a 2-target cleave, but mainly a single target boss the entire time. And I think that's kind of where we excel in keys, because we're kind of cheeks in most of these dungeons.
Once, my people thrived under the guidance of the Black Empire. Yet, refused to reclaim that glory.
So here, the most important thing to kick is the Overseer, and there's not much going on besides those wasps, or besides those skitters flying into people. We accidentally pulled in a second set of skitters. This is actually very, very dangerous. I already used the Ring of Peace in a defensive manner to make sure that our tank stays alive. But here, we just need to crank out this pull and kill these guys as fast as possible. The Resto Shaman makes a very good play there by moving the Ring of Peace over out of the circle webs. We're still looking at that Overseer kick to make sure that nothing goes off, and we're killing these carriers as they're going in. I don't think this was in the original route to pull these extra carriers, but it happens, and this group was very, very good, and we were able to recover very quickly from that. Going into this pull, we have the Overseer again that we need to get kicks on. We actually have 2 of them here, and that can cause some very, very weird circle overlaps on the ground. We let a cast go off. We're taking a ton of damage. I noticed that too late, but luckily the Resto Shaman got our back there. The most dangerous thing here for the tank is the drones. You can see he is hiding and running away because he's probably taking a ton of damage. I use the Ring of Peace in a defensive manner here to make sure we get the drones off of him. In my personal opinion, I think the Ring of Peace is one of the best utility things for a tank. And if you can learn how to use that when your tank is in trouble, especially in a PUG, that's going to provide a ton of value for your group, because once the tank goes down, the group most of the time falls apart. So it doesn't really matter how much damage you're doing. You could be doing 5 million overall, but if the tank dies, if people start dying, none of that's going to matter. Here we're going to be 5% over count, which is totally fine. Again, I'm pretty sure we weren't supposed to pull that extra set of skitters. Just stuff happens. It doesn't really matter. We have 6.5 minutes going into this last boss. You just hold W in this dungeon, and that's all you do. Another thing, those circles that the Overseer spawn, they tend to spawn on players. So if you're a super spread out, or you have ranged people or healers like sitting on the stairs and everyone else is in a different area, those circles can be really spread out and could be pretty dangerous. We're going into the last boss with 5 minutes remaining on the key. This boss is the hardest thing in this dungeon, in my opinion. It makes it a lot harder as well if you're playing with a full melee comp, which my static group most of the time is a full melee comp, and we just added a melee healer. So we have 5 melees just sitting here, and it's very, very challenging. And it's just something you have to learn to play around. You have to focus on dodging the green waves. That is the most important part of this dungeon. Don't dispel yourself instantly. Play this slow. It really doesn't matter. If the goal is to time the key, it literally doesn't matter. Just focus on staying alive and killing the boss. You have plenty of time. Once you start maybe getting up into the higher keys past this point, you can optimize damage. And if you're playing with like a static group, I doubt someone's going to be listing a plus 17 Ara-Kara in the open queue. You just have to play safe on this boss. Something that you can do as a Windwalker monk that I would encourage you guys to try in the lower keys before you go into any of the higher keys is to make sure that you are able to transcendence out once the cast goes off for this boss. So once the boss is sucking you in at like 0.4 or 0.5 seconds, you can transcendence back to a spot, and then I also roll there as well to make sure that I don't mess it up, and it will keep you safe. It's not something that I actually encourage you to do unless it's a very, very critical situation and there's not enough purple circles. Yeah, it looks cool that you can do that, and yeah, it's really not that hard to master, but I've seen plenty of people on higher keys mess this up and go, I've never missed this. I've always teleported back. I've always Demon Hunter jumped back, and I've never missed it, and they end up dying and the keys bricked. When there's a million purple circles, all you have to do is just run in there and stand. This boss is not complicated. This boss is not hard. You just have to play safe and time the key. On fights like this, ranged characters obviously excel because they have damn near 100% uptime on the boss, whereas melee has to play extra careful because you're really close to the boss and you also have a ton of mechanics to avoid, especially with like the green waves and like everything that's going on. So here we ended up lusting. There is a spirit link up. I'm going to run into that. Not much else going on. Kill the boss and time this key. The boss is at 7%. So we ended up getting this key timed with 1 minute and 37 seconds left. And this was a pretty good key. Thank you for watching this. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to like and subscribe.